Okay, we're continuing along in the Haggadah of Chaim Kanievsky, and he writes the following idea. It says in the Haggadah, Hava nischachma loi. Paro saw that Klal Yisrael was a very dangerous nation to him. They were multiplying by leaps and bounds. They were taking over the country of Mitzrayim. So he told to the Mitzrayim, we'll see what he told, Hava, come, nischachma loi, let's deal with them in a wise way. Let's deal with them wisely. So the Gemara says on this pasuk over here that who was the people that Paro consulted to deal with Klal Yisrael wisely? It was none other than Bilam, Yisro, and Eiv. He came to these three, we'll call them great people amongst the Goyim, and he asked them for the advice, what should I do with Klal Yisrael? So the Gemara tells us the following. Bilam said, you should be Meshabed, you should put the Jews into slavery. Eiv was shoisik, he was quiet. And Yisro said he wants nothing at all to do with this, and he ran away. So the Gemara says over there that Bilam, who said that you should be Meshabed, that you should enslave the Jewish people, he was punished. His punishment was that he was put to death. Eiv, who was shasik, who was quiet, he didn't say a word over here, what to do, what not to do, save the Jews, don't save the Jews, his silence, his punishment was suffering. It was almost like a life of suffrage that he had to go through. And Yisro, who ran away to show that he's not going to answer Paro anything, because he doesn't believe in such a thing, that they should do anything to the Jewish people, he was rewarded that his offspring or his descendants are going to become members of the Sanhedrin. So Rav Chaim Kanievsky asks the following question. He said, Eiv remained silent, and his punishment is a life of Yisurim, of suffering. Bilam gives the advice that you should be Meshabed, you should enslave the Jewish people, and his punishment is death immediately. It would seem to be that the death penalty is something that is worse, something that is, how does he say the question over here? That death itself, a quick death, is really an easier punishment than lifelong suffering. And therefore he asks over here that why is it, I'm making a mistake over here in the question over here. Hold on one second. Okay, that's the question. So, this is the question. The question is that if Bilam gave an advice that you should enslave the Jews, and his punishment is a quick death, so it would seem to be that a quick death is an easier punishment than a life of suffering that Eiv had to go through. So if the worst punishment is a life of suffering, and Bilam seems to be getting the worst punishment over here because he's the one that's getting killed, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu should punish Bilam with the life of suffering, and not only Eiv, but Bilam should have got the life of suffering as well. So he answers a very beautiful idea. And he says that the reality is that every moment that a person has life, even if it's accompanied by the worst yisurim, the worst suffering in the world, the suffering that a person receives in this world is the greatest gift that a person can have. Because every ounce of suffering that a person receives in this world, besides the fact that it will be translated into bracha in the world to come, but it means that the person was granted more life. He was granted another day, another year, another decade. It comes al yidei yisurim with suffering. Suffering, though we know, like the Gemara says elsewhere, is mechaper. It comes to atone for a person's sins, either in this world or a previous life, whatever it is that he's going through. And therefore, to have the schus to live, that itself is something that is valuable. Bilam HaRasha, who gives the advice, you should destroy the Jews, enslave them, make their lives miserable, he doesn't deserve to live a life of suffering. And therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes him away quickly. Masha'enken, another, Eiv, who would not say one way or the other, which really Eiv, we would assume deeper down, felt that enslaving the Jewish people and causing them pain was the wrong thing. He just didn't know how to, he didn't stand up to Paro. So his punishment was, since that you're not a Rasha like Bilam, I'll give you the suffering in this world, and that will be mechaper, that will take away from your suffering and the punishments in the world to come. And that's the entire story of Eov, the entire book of Eov itself. That's one thing that he says tonight. Number two, he writes over here, it says, V'yavidu Mitzrayim es b'nei Yisrael befarech. The Egyptians, they enslaved the Jewish people befarech, with hard labor. So he points out that it says in one pasuk, Vayavidu Mitzrayim es b'nei Yisrael befarech, and in another verse it says, Es kol avoidasam befarech. So why does the Torah point out twice that HaKadosh Baruch Hu enslaved them with farech, with hard labor? Once we know already that there's parach, that there's hard labor over there, that should be enough. We know. Why does I have to say it twice? So he says a beautiful midrash. The midrash says the following, that every single Jew in Mitzrayim was expected to make 600 bricks a day for the parach, for the Egyptians. 600 bricks. It's a lot of bricks. It's a lot of bricks for a Jew to make who doesn't have any machinery. And as we see later on, they ran out of the straw. They had to get their own bricks. 600 bricks a day. So the gematria of the word farech, pei, reish, chaf, is 300. So 300 twice is 600. And that was the back-breaking labor. The hard labor of Klal Yisrael was they had to make 600 bricks. Befarech, 600, that's the gematria. He also points out from the Pirkei of Rabbi Eliezer, that there were, the wives would often come and help their husbands on the work site so that they can help the work go a little bit faster during the day. So the husbands would make 300 bricks, and the wives would make 300 bricks. So each, the husband and the wife, both had this very difficult farech, this very hard labor upon them, and that's how they got to 600 bricks. Then he says over here a beautiful idea, and that is Vayishma Elokim es Nakasam. It says that Hashem heard the Nakasam, the groaning of Klal Yisrael. They began to groan in Mitzrayim, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu heard their cries. So Rav Chaim points out over here that if you look in the Torah, in the Psukim over there are several different words that are used to describe the tefillah, the prayers of Klal Yisrael at this point. Remember, they're 210 years in slavery, and they have really estranged themselves from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There wasn't much davening going on during those years. Suddenly, V'yamas Melech Mitzrayim, the king of Egypt, dies. The Netziv says on those words that when the king of the country dies, the whole country shuts down. The flag is held at half-mast, and nobody goes to work that day. So it's the first day in who knows hundreds of years that Klal Yisrael doesn't have to go to work. So it says in Netziv, they gathered in those streets all together as one, and they began to cry out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and in the schus of that crying out to Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu began to save them. So he points out that if you look in the Torah, there are several different words that it uses for the cries of the Jewish people. It says V'yanchu, V'yizaku, it says Na'akasam, Shavasam, which means that they groaned, they cried out, there was an outcry, they were groaning more, all different ways to say seemingly the same thing. So the Midrash points out that not all tefillahs, not all prayers that a person will utter to HaKadosh Baruch Hu are equal. And they're not all the same. And that's why the Torah itself, and we find in Chazal as well, Chazal also use different words to describe tefillah, what it is, because there are all different ways that a person can cry out to the Ribbono Shel Olam. There are ways, when you have children and they're younger, so there are certain screams that they have. They know the shrillest scream in the world that's just going to get right inside the eardrums of the parent and get into their heart, and then you can't say no. There's other cries that kids make, which are whiny cries, and the parents say, just whine by yourself. So every cry that there is a different cry, and there's a different connotation. And the Torah is telling us over here that Klal Yisrael was trying out the different avenues of tefillah to be ma'or the rachamim, to arouse the mercy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he said that's why it says, in the Gemara tells us, that the Gemara says, Rav Chama bar Chanina said, that if a person, Raya Adam, a person sees that they're misfal, they're davening to Hashem, V'loi nishma, and they're not answered, the tefillah is not heard. So daven again. Again and again and again. A person never has to stop davening to the Rebbeinu Shalom. So he brings down over here that people would come to Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky all the time with many problems and many difficulties, many yisurim that they were going through in life. And they would always ask for like the quick fix. What should I do? Should I learn this? Should I do that? I'll give $100 stock. What should I do? So he says that Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky would tell many, many people, the best hishtadlus, the best effort that you can make to solve your problems is daven to Hashem. If a person will cry out, and you'll find that cry that will penetrate the heart of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then just like Klal Yisrael was answered in Mitzrayim, in Yetz Hashem you'll be answered for all of your tefillos as well.